Hello, art friends. My name is Fleshwad, and my channel turned 5 years old on May 3rd. Today, in celebration of that, I have compiled my 5 favorite stories I've ever read on my channel in the 5 years I've had it. All stories are linked below with timestamps in case you want to skip to the creepiest story I've ever read, and one I think about daily. So sit back, relax, eat some popcorn if you have it, and most importantly, enjoy. Today I'm going to be reading a creepypasta titled Mermaids Are Starving. I walk at dawn by the avenue with a soft zigzag. It takes me a lot of effort so the alcohol doesn't make me stumble or lose my way back home. I can hear the motor of a faraway car, the buzz of electricity cables, the gurgling of a nearly dry fountain, and a song, a soft, melodious murmur. I stop to observe the old fountain, one of so many embellishments the city doesn't care to maintain, with broken stone pieces, mold in every crack, all kinds of garbage floating in the water that was far from a clear and slippery bottom. Sitting on the edge is a petite girl, humming. I hadn't noticed her presence until now. I approach with slow steps to see her better. She looks so alone. Hair falls over her face in a tangle of dreadlocks, combed awkwardly with a shell hairpin and what looks like fish bones. Something drives me to speak to her. The alcohol in my veins, probably, because the girl doesn't have a captivating beauty. Slow, she turns her body in my direction, giving me a better glimpse of the slim body covered only by a volatile sleeveless dress that barely reaches to cover her breasts. I run my eyes over the long, uncovered legs and bare feet. Closer, her skin is greenish and so thin. Anorexic, perhaps. Not receiving a response to my greeting, I decide to ask her if she's lost, bending down to see her face. The girl shakes her head and says nothing more, continuing to sing. It is so beautiful, I can't stop hearing it. Weird, something with such beauty to come out of dry and chapped lips. I try to talk to her again. I propose companionship. We could have fun together. Yes, she may be bony and have a battered appearance, but I'm not the demanding type when it comes to pleasures of the flesh. If she'll sing for me, I'll happily have her to warm my bed with her body. Without a word, the girl raises her arms and puts them around my shoulders. One of the hands tangles between my hair, giving me chills. She's so cold, but it doesn't matter. I want to kiss her mouth, her face, her body. The desire becomes so unbearable that her appearance ceases to annoy me. I'm gonna make her sing for me. I let myself be dragged. I can feel her bones against my chest. I raise her face and see sunken eyes, accompanied by a crooked smile. She pulls and I stumble, taking us both to the interior of the fountain. There's no more pirates on the wide sea, sailors to charm. Water hit wakes me, eyes open, disoriented. Still under the water, the girl turns and pushes me against the bottom, without giving me a chance to breathe. Murky water surrounds me. I should be able to swim to the surface. The fountain isn't that deep. So why does the surface seem so far away? I kick, stroke, but I can't get out. No one hears our broken voices. Foolish men to drag to the deep. My lungs burn, my eyes sting. Bony arms surround my waist and another pair, and another one. I'm soon surrounded. Between blinks I see them, faces deformed by hunger. Sharp teeth, hair tangled with seaweed, dull, scaly skin. With fish tails. All the hideous women have fish tails. All over the damn land they hide. We'll exit the sea and bring them to us. They disappear when I start struggling. Air escapes me with a silent scream. One of them bite my arm, piercing skin, veins, and muscle all together. That's enough so the rest can join, just like piranhas. They destroy my body with every bite, and air, I need air. My lungs fill with water. Kiss our fangs, feel the caresses that tear. One of them approaches my face, and I come across her sunken eyes. The fountain girl. She smiles more. Thousands of deformed faces come out from the deep darkness. Hungry, keen for my flesh, my bones, my blood. I hear her sing again. Fill our stomachs. We are
starving.
In the news today, after 8 hours of his disappearance, the clothing of another missing young man is found. The garments are bloodstained, suggesting a violent attack. The police still can find no explanation for the residue of salt water. Apparently seawater near crime scenes, since the nearest coast is at least 15 hours away. More information as the investigation proceeds. This story is titled Something Weird is Happening in My Animal Crossing Village and was written by Everything by Design. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Animal Crossing, it's a create your own village game where you can decorate your own house and customize your character with clothes and stuff. Even do fun activities like go fishing or bug collecting. You do all of this while living amongst the other residents of the village, all of whom are animals who act like humans. The game is more geared for a younger audience, but I find it fun. Judge me or whatever. Anyways, I was feeling a bit nostalgic a few weeks ago. I had a strange itch to play Animal Crossing, even though I hadn't touched any game from the series in years. So I picked up my 3DS and downloaded Animal Crossing New Leaf. I named my character Christopher, my real name, and even named the fictional town after the town I lived in real life. I had a lot of fun playing it the first few days. I remembered all the fun I had playing the original on my GameCube when I was younger. It became an almost ritualistic undertaking. Every night I would lay in bed with the lights off and play until I got tired and went to sleep. Sometimes I'd even dream about the game. My interest slowly declined in the game in the following weeks as there was nothing interesting happening in my village. But to my surprise, something sickeningly strange happened to my game a few days prior to me writing this post. I went about my day fishing and buying furniture for my house, normal Animal Crossing stuff. During my activities, I saw Boone, a baboon, outside his house tending to some flowers, so I decided to stop and say hi. Before any other chat option appeared on my screen, Boone began telling me that one of the other residents of the village was missing. He gave me no details about who it was or anything. Then the regular chat options appeared. I exited the dialogue and started to think. I did notice Frigga, a penguin that had lived in my town since I created it, was nowhere to be found. This wasn't too unusual, as residents can do as they please all day. But I had already been to all of the shops, town hall, and the museum, so I knew she wasn't in any of those places. I also traversed the entire map twice over looking for her. At the time, I thought this could possibly be some type of in-game event, similar to a game of hide and seek. I searched every villager's home besides hers, as I didn't think she would hide in her own house. I came up empty. I stupidly began shaking trees and hitting rocks with my shovel, waiting for a penguin to fall out. I gave up after some time. Reluctantly, I went to her house, but the lights weren't on and there wasn't smoke coming out of her chimney. Those two things signify that the resident is inside their home. I proceeded to knock on her door. I expected a message to come up, saying she was not home at the time. It always does that if you try to enter a villager's home while they are outside. But to my surprise, nothing happened. I could knock, and it had no reaction. I had never seen this before. On a whim, I decided to click on the signpost next to her door, indicating whose house this was. Every house has one, and it always reads, characters' names, house. This sign, however, read simply, Christopher. This started to worry me. Why is there someone else living in Frigga's home? Why is another NPC telling me she's missing? Why does the new resident occupying her home have the same name as me? I found this all to be pretty creepy. That was the first time I felt that I had stumbled into something more than just a series of glitches or an in-game event. A missing resident and someone assuming control over their house doesn't seem like a very fitting event for a children's game. There had to be an explanation. I was blankly staring at the screen of my 3DS, pondering all these questions when I noticed it. There was a pale figure staring intently at my character from inside of Frigga's home, through the front window. He looked eerily similar to my character, but much more pale, and had his head poorly shaved. His bloodshot eyes were wider than any other characters I'd seen, almost bulging from his skull. I could even make out what looked to be grotesque blue veins running through his face in all directions. He smiled a sinister grin that raised both sides of his lips, only showing his top teeth. All this was so vivid, even through Animal Crossing's low-rendered cartoon graphics. I blinked and the figure was gone. Was that Christopher? I slammed my 3DS shut and held the power button. I was now in my bed alone with my 3DS in my lap, hands shaking lightly with fear. The image of the cartoon character was burnt into my brain. I put the 3DS in a kitchen cabinet. I stayed in the bedroom for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep well. I haven't touched my 3DS since that small incident. I miss playing Animal Crossing, but I'm still incredibly creeped out. Maybe I'll pick it up again tonight with the lights on. Maybe everything that happened will be corrected. Thinking back now, I didn't even save. All of this is pretty creepy, but it can't be sinister. I mean, this is Animal Crossing we're talking about, right? I'm not sure what's compelled me to continue writing about these events. I guess just to hide my loneliness and continue the illusion that I have someone to share my experience with. I scoured the internet after posting my first experience in hopes that I might get an answer as to what happened with my game, and I found no results for missing villages who got their houses taken over, or of a resident known as Christopher. So the night after my first post, I decided I would try to play Animal Crossing again. I should mention that there is a mail system in Animal Crossing. You can send letters to any villager you want, and they can even send you ones back. They can arrive when you're online or offline, doesn't matter. They will just sit in the mailbox outside your house until you pick the letters up. I decided to leave the lights on this time for obvious reasons and started up my 3DS at my usual time. I also decided that I would play the game normally and not actively seek out the terror-inducing situation regarding Frigga's house. Why I wanted to do this is really unknown to me. I guess blocking stuff out and pretending things aren't real is a defense mechanism I've used my entire life. But enough psychology. I loaded into my game. No special message from Isabel this time. I was secretly praying my theory about not saving was right. I immediately walked out my front door to see I had mail. I found that I had 3 letters, all from Christopher. They read as follows. Letter 1. Christopher, I'm having a real fun time with Frigga, trying on her clothes and skin. I saw your house today. It looks very nice. Maybe I will come in soon. Maybe I can try on your clothes and skin. Christopher. Letter 2. Chris, your house is even nicer from the inside. I've tried on some of your clothes like I said I would. They look very good on me. Maybe I should talk to your friends with them on. Maybe I just want your skin. Maybe I just want to be Christopher. Chris. Letter 3. Christopher, I live here now. These are my clothes. These are my friends. I just need your skin. Christopher. After reading the letters, I was pretty much sick to my stomach with fear and questioning all logic surrounding my experience with this game. Was there seriously an NPC in this game talking about taking my skin and becoming me? Like I said, this is a children's game. There's no way this is normal. I had to make sense of this. None of these things could be happening in the game world without human involvement. There is an online option in the game, but I had never messed with it, so that could be the reason. I abandoned my previous plan to play the game normally very quickly. I somehow convinced myself this was probably some kid who read way too many creepypastas and was just trolling people online. I needed to confront my fears and prove myself right. I realized I didn't have to look very far to get answers. According to the letters, I was literally standing outside his new house. My house. I slowly turned my character around, took a long, deep breath, and opened up the door to my house. In the back of my mind, I was hoping and praying I would find nothing at all. The screen transitioned into the interior of my house. An unrecognizable music was playing in the background now, almost like there were 2 upbeat tunes from the game mashed into one, creating one crumpled, disturbing mess of music. All my furniture was gone and the room was dimly lit by only the brightness of my screen. On the ground, I could see pixel-esque etchings on the floor. They were all names, carved into the floor. In the very center of the room was my name, Christopher. I moved my character further into my home, which pushed the screen to fully view the back end of the room. There he stood against the back wall, his face still grotesque as ever, but now his body was in full view. His body was gaunt. His ribs protruded out twice as far as his stomach. His appendages were as thin as twigs. He wore only a pair of black underwear, and the blue veins I first saw on his face were clearly visible throughout his entire anatomy. If this really was just some troll using mods or hacks, he was a twisted individual. I stared for only a minute when abruptly a dialogue bubble opened up on my screen from Christopher. It read, "You are here to give me your skin, Christopher." Using the same animation a regular character would use to equip a fishing rod or bug-catching net, his character looked to have equipped some type of knife. Christopher proceeded to pounce on my character. I witnessed my character brutally murdered right before my eyes. I am no stranger to violence in video games, but this was sadistic. He ran the knife from the bottom of my character's throat down to his groin and began ripping out all of the insides and feasting upon them. I tried so hard to close my eyes, but I could not look away. I tried even harder to let go of the 3DS, maybe even throw it across the room, but something had my hands pinned to the system, like Christ's hands to the cross. I questioned how this could be in the game's coding, but little logic remained in this game for me. The disgusting life form made his way to my arms and legs, ripping away bones as he saw fit. I managed to close my eyes at this point, but reopened them moments later to find he was jarring the knife back and forth across my character's neck, trying to decapitate him. At last, he started ripping the skin off my character's face. He began to place the skin from my character's face upon his own. Moments later, he was slipping into the sack of flesh that was once the body of my character. He had truly tried on my skin. The horror I had just witnessed was finally over, but he was still standing, draped in bloody, cartoony flesh of another being, staring deeply right at me through the screen. This was the first time the character ever truly acknowledged my human presence. I feel like hours passed in that moment, though I know it was only for a few fleeting seconds. Suddenly the screens went black, showing only my morbid reflection staring back at me. Static ran across both screens of my 3DS. I saw flashes of my home screen and the murder room fade in and out. Finally, the game system let out a loud rattle. My 3DS became exceedingly warm to the touch. I desperately tried to put the system down, but something was keeping my hands from doing so once again. I suddenly felt the urge to vomit, like something had entered my body uninvited, wisping its way through my intestines, spreading in every direction. I sat in my bed staring blankly at my 3DS for an uncomfortable amount of time. I don't think I even had control over my own thoughts during that period of time. It felt like weeks had passed. It could have been hours, or it could have been minutes. I wouldn't have known the difference. I awoke from my trance-like state to the sound of my 3DS turning itself on. I clicked on Animal Crossing, passed through the main menu, and selected Continue Game. There was only one profile to continue with. Christopher. I felt no fear or dread when I saw this. I cannot explain why. I laid my head down and went to sleep with the lights on. I awoke several hours later with my 3DS on my lap, closed and turned off. In the days following these events, I have felt extremely tired and sick. I haven't eaten, and I've called into work since the incident regarding Christopher. I'm going to take a quick break from writing this to call my mom or a therapist. I'll try to give some perspective on how I've been feeling after I've done that. Might be losing it. I phoned my mom like I said I would. I tried to explain what had happened to me, but the only thing that came out of my mouth were the sounds the Animal Crossing villagers make. I tried so desperately to say anything in English. Everything I managed to say sounded straight out of the game, when finally, as if forced out of my vocal cords by something other than myself, I spoke English. One poorly formed sentence retched from the back of my mouth. Maybe I can come over and try on your clothes. Maybe I can try on your skin. My mother instantly hung up. I need to sleep. I can't think about that phone call anymore. I just went to the mirror. I look a disgusting shade of pale white, and I'm so skinny. I can see my bones just beneath my skin. I can see my throbbing veins more clearly than ever. My hair can easily be pulled out by the handful. I'm thinking irrationally. I can't even go outside anymore. I can barely write this anymore. Something happened to me in that trance. I know it. I don't know what though. Maybe I'll sleep some more. Maybe I'll play Animal Crossing. I saw the story Chris wrote about me. I saw people who like Animal Crossing. Maybe I can visit your houses. Maybe I can pick one I really like. Maybe I can try on your clothes. Maybe I can try on your skin. I'm pregnant, and fingers keep popping out of my belly button. Posted by U/Edward the Crazy Man. I never imagined that I would be a mother, considering that I didn't much care for children. But when the little plastic pregnancy test confirmed my suspicions, I found myself rationalizing reasons to keep it. So I would. My friends called me crazy for my decision. I was single, and the pregnancy was a byproduct of one of those one-night stands I'd picked up at the bar. Most likely, it was that weirdo cashier I'd met weeks prior. Being a single mother, I'm sure, would come with its own set of wild adventures. But I was ready for it. I even started picking names. My belly swelled larger than it should have within the first trimester. It bulged out from beneath my shirts, and although that brought on a set of self-esteem issues I'd never even considered, I rubbed my belly down with oils so as to prevent stretch marks. The tips I read online assured me that this would help, but even still, my skin would tear in the night. Things began to get even weirder. I knew my stomach was too large for how far along I was, but every specialist I went to would say the same things. Every pregnancy is different, or there is no right way to have a baby. I remember the first ultrasound. I took my best friend with me. As a mother herself, she was one of the few people supportive of my decision to keep it. It was an exciting occasion. After being examined in the down under, the doctor rubbed the jelly across my abdomen and then moseyed the sensor around. There it was. I reached over and grabbed my best friend's hand, giving it an excited squeeze. She offered a smile, but her eyes strayed back to the monitor. "That's odd," she said. Small panic settled in as my eyes darted to the monitor. It looked normal. I thought, "What's wrong?" Before my friend could say anything, the doctor interjected. "You've got a monster of a baby, that's for sure." He offered a smile. "Nothing to worry about," he said, furrowing his brow and returning his gaze back to the monitor. My friend whistled. "No kidding, it really is a big one, isn't it?" The doctor spoke again. "I won't lie to you. It's about twice as large as it should be at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if you end up experiencing fetal macrosomia, though I wouldn't worry about it. It happens more often than you think. So it's perfectly natural? I asked. That's right, don't worry. He removed the sensor and began removing the jelly from my belly with a cloth. The last thing an expecting mother needs to do is worry. Your body will be going through enough stress as it is, so I wouldn't add to it if I were you. My friend squeezed my hand. As I wobbled out of the parking lot, I continuously rubbed my tummy with a strange wonder. I felt a kick and almost shrieked. My emotions came out in equal measures of horror and elation. Come feel. I reached over to my friend. She placed her hands over my stomach. I always thought that was the coolest part. I slept that night in a mess of sweat and disorganized sheets and blankets. My hair clung to me and my back was immeasurably sore, as were my breasts. Eventually, I sat up in the bed and swiped the hair from my face, moving to the kitchen to down half a quart of OJ. After smacking my lips satisfactorily, I hopped in the shower, hoping the hot water would do something to soothe my body. I'd known that carrying a baby to term would be difficult, but I'd never imagined it would wear on me this much. That was the first time I'd begun to feel regret, or at least the first time that it had manifested in a way I could fathom. It came from seemingly nowhere and all around at once, and I kneeled in the shower for longer than I should have, crying into the palms of my hands as the water rushed over me. I took a bowl of chips and moved to the living room, watching late-night infomercials absently, hoping to distract myself with some new tomato slicer. It did not work. I moved to the bedroom after half an hour, feeling sorry for myself, and bundled up on the comforter in my robe with the towel wrapped around my head. I began to feel nauseous and thought that maybe the chips I'd eaten had gone bad. Or maybe the little person growing inside of me didn't agree with my taste in snack foods. I cradled my stomach and whispered to it, "Shut up." I rolled over onto my side to try and release some of the pressure I was feeling growing in my abdomen. I'm still the boss here. I fell asleep. When I came to my alarm exclaiming that I needed to drag these lazy bones out of bed, I wobbled to the bathroom, letting my wardrobe fall open. I stood in the doorway leading into the bathroom, frozen in absolute terror. My own face stared back at me in shock, but that was not the thing that forced me to stop. My eyes wandered down to my exposed stomach. As my stomach had stretched out, my belly button, too, had begun to protrude, and so at first glance, that's all I thought it was. That was not what it was. Sticking from the center of my belly button was a tiny little finger. My hands immediately went to it, but I also didn't want to touch the thing. I jerked my erratic fingers back and stumbled over to the sink basin, steadying myself there. I looked down at it. The flesh, my flesh, around the finger was swollen and pink. As I pressed a finger near it, I could feel the heat radiating from it. The finger twisted around, forcing a dark red ooze to drip onto the tiles of the bathroom floor. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to abort this thing. What was happening to me? Why was this happening to me? My mind shot back to my physician's words. Fetal macrosomia. The finger darted around in all directions, flexing its joints. There was no way this was normal. I don't care what anyone has to say about it. Hissing in through my teeth, I took my index finger and began pushing it back into my stomach. It wriggled around violently to my touch. I could feel that it hated me. I pushed it in anyway. A gaping hole in the center of my bulging stomach was the only thing it left behind. I put medical tape over the wound and carried on about my day. The sickness I'd felt earlier only grew and grew and grew. There were times that I barely made it to the toilet. It seemed black sludge was coming from both ends. The finger came back, pushing itself out so the tape fell away. I could feel it wriggling around beneath my blouse. After trying to push it back in, I resolved to take more desperate measures. I moved through the house and came to a stop at the fridge in the kitchen. there was a little magnet cubby that I put miscellaneous things in. Bills I needed to pay, pens, pencils, scissors. I took the scissors. Please stop. I whimpered down at the thing protruding from my stomach. Please, please, please stop. I took the scissors and touched the tip of them to my finger. It jerked around, flexing. Then a wet noise I couldn't replicate with the muscles in my mouth if I were given 1,000,000 years came from my belly. The rest of the hand followed its finger. I let out a sound approximating sadness. Immeasurable pain ran the length of my body and I fell to the ground, landing face up. At first I stared at the ceiling, and then wagered a glance down at the hand. It waved at me. It knew what it was doing. Whimpers escaped me, lingering in an otherwise silent kitchen. I don't think scissors will fix an obtrusion like that. I wrapped myself in a thick jacket to hide me being in the family way. I'm going to go down to the hardware store. Bolt cutters might work. Next time you see her, make sure you hug your mom extra tight. Posted by you/Nick Boddick. I never met my mom. Not really, anyway. She didn't abandon us. She didn't die giving birth. I wasn't put up for adoption. Nothing like that. We lived in the same house for 12 years. Our paths just never crossed, which I guess is because we didn't really have a path. She stayed in one room my entire life. The third door on the left of the hallway in our 3-bedroom, ranch-style home. A room I wasn't allowed in. The door to Mom's room was different from the rest of the doors in our house. It looked heavier, sturdier, and there were a series of locks on it, the keys to which my dad always kept on his person. My dad did an admirable job of balancing her situation and my knowing that she loved me. He would come out of my mom's room and tell me that she'd asked about me, and he would deliver messages from me to her. At least, that's what he told me. I suppose I don't have any real way of knowing if she actually asked about me, or if he told her what I'd said. But I guess it doesn't matter. As a child, I was equal parts terrified and curious of what my mom did behind that door. There was a constant odor that permeated the house, that originated from that room. One so bad it meant we couldn't have company. I had a variety of excuses for why my friends couldn't come over, none of which were, my house smells like something crawled up something that crawled up something else and died, because my mom is a recluse. In fact, I was under strict instruction by my dad to tell anyone who asked that my mom was dead. She might as well have been. The house probably would have smelled better. In the morning, when I would get up and get ready for school, I would sometimes see my dad mopping the hallway around the door. He always had some excuse, like he'd spilled something or the ceiling was leaking. But I knew better. Something was coming out of my mom's room. Some nights, I would sneak out of bed and peek my head out into the hallway. There was always, day and night, a light emitting from under the door. When I would watch from my room, I would see pauses in that light, interruptions as though someone was moving around within. I always assumed it was my dad, as he spent most nights behind that thick wooden door. But it was the sounds that would send my mind wandering, with images of all manner of violence and horror. Every now and again, a scream would erupt from down the hall. It was guttural, intentional, the scream of a woman in fear for her life. There would be bangs, crashes, the sound of things breaking, and my dad would emerge from my mom's room, breathing heavily and wiping himself down with a towel, covered in either sweat or water or both or neither, something that made his silhouette glisten in the darkness. Then he would get the mop. When playing outside, if I could find the opportunity, Sometimes I would try to look through the window, which had always been covered with a thick comforter. One day, however, the comforter had been moved ever so slightly, allowing a sliver of visibility into the room. I peered through that thin space, my vision obstructed even further by the condensation that had accumulated from within. I could just barely make out the shape of the head resting on a pillow inside the room. Seemingly sleeping, I stood there, my 7-year-old brain trying to fill in the blank left by my limited view. I stared at the head on the pillow, shifting to my left in a futile effort to see more of the body to which that head belonged. I could make out the vague shapes of a body under a blanket, but my main focus was the only visible part of her head. As I turned back to my first position, a twig snapped under my foot, and inside the room, the head on that pillow turned toward me, and I could feel that person. I could feel my mom, looking into my eyes. We each held our gaze for what felt like an eternity, and it was, above all else, a serene moment, the very first one shared between a mother and her son. I remember a warm breeze gently blowing past me, the sound of leaves rustling and crickets dancing. There was a peace in that moment that I haven't experienced before and haven't since. The peace was broken when I heard my dad's voice calling out for me from the back porch. It startled me, and when I looked back to the window, the comforter was slowly, deliberately, being put back in its proper place, blocking all visibility into my mom's room. What I found odd, however, was that with my last glance into the room, I saw my mom still laying down, still looking at me. With my dad on the back porch and my mom in bed, who moved the comforter back? That question plagued me for 5 years, up until the second and last time I laid eyes on my mother. When I was 8 years old, my dad informed me that he was going to be doing work in the basement, and as such, it was now strictly off limits. It wasn't a finished basement, mostly just boxes and bins and other disorganized junk, so I didn't spend time down there anyways, but it was now deemed as a space as forbidden as my mom's room. For the next 2 weeks, the normal sounds of my home were drowned out by a cacophony of drills and saws and hammers, as well as the increased frequency of the aforementioned shrieking that rang out from behind the third door on the left. As time went on, my curiosity only increased. At 10 years old, I asked my dad that question that I can only assume he'd hoped he'd never hear. Why doesn't Mom ever come out of her room? I watched the color drain from my dad's face as he sat across from me at the dinner table. As a tense pause lingered between us, a sound that had been becoming more and more frequent over the past year rang out. A sloshing sound, not dissimilar from someone squeezing a wet sponge, accompanied by an occasional soft bang on the door, and a quiet but lingering groan, and filled the air between us as my dad searched for an answer. "She's sick," was all he managed to get out. We finished dinner with an awkward silence hanging between us. That and the music of Misery, that was the soundtrack of my mom's room. And that's how it was between Dad and I. Aside from that one time when I was 10, we left the elephant in the room unaddressed. When I was 11, however, I became more brazen in my curiosity. I began paying more attention to my dad. As time passed, he spent more and more time in the basement, which meant less time with my mom. The screaming became so frequent that he soundproofed her room, and although it certainly muffled the sounds of anguish, it didn't mute them completely. Besides, there were more noises now than just the ones coming from down the hall. Now they were coming from below me. I would put my ear to the hardwood floor and listen, and I would hear several distinct groans and moans and screams. Once, or rarely, twice a month, my dad would remand me to my room under the threat of extreme grounding, and over the course of about 2 hours, those collective pain sounds of agony would cease one by one, until they were all silent. At that point, my dad's van would pull out of the driveway and I was allowed to leave my room. This is the way things were until about 6 months before I turned 13. It was a Thursday night, around 10 p.m. I was in bed, trying to fall asleep against the sounds of what seemed to be an especially uneasy night in the basement and my mom's room. The screams were as loud as they'd ever been, the most prominent of them, the very first one I'd ever heard. But then another scream joined the chorus, and though I had never heard him scream before, I knew it belonged to my dad. He bellowed out in what seemed to be incredible pain, then started howling my name. "Nick, help me! Help me, please, Nick! Help me! Help me!" I leaped up from my bed and looked down the hall. It sounded like a tornado was occurring in my mom's room. Wood splintering, glass breaking, the wall being smashed into, maybe even through. The light underneath the door was flickering wildly. There was a ton of movement within. I ran to the door, from behind which came my father's pained shrieks, although by that point they were slowly becoming muffled and turning into more of a gurgling noise. I knew that he left the door unlocked when he was in my mom's room, because he knew he could count on me never ever going inside. Not with the amount of reprimanding he promised would follow. But now I had to. I stood at the door for what seemed like a lifetime in the moment, but it was truly only a second or two. I was finally going to see my mom, face to face. No matter what horrors were happening inside that room, something good would come from it. I was afraid, more afraid than I've ever been. But I held on to that idea as I turned the heavy brass knob and opened the third door on the left. I immediately vomited, for as bad as the smell was in the rest of the house, the room from which it was birthed was worse 1,000 times over. It was a putrid aroma of pee, blood, and any other number of horrible scents. But what was worse was what I was seeing. I'm not sure there are words in the English or any other language that can adequately describe what I saw, but I will use whatever words at my disposal to paint a picture as clear as I can. The room was an absolute mess of broken wood and glass. The drywall had been torn from a large majority of the walls, the slats behind it broken and jagged. Blood and a clear liquid had been splashed all around the room, and the floor was slick with it, pooling in certain areas. The hardwood floor had been gouged and was ripped completely apart in certain spots. The centerpiece of the room, however, was my mother. The headboard of the bed was still visible, but that was about it. Her naked body had grown out with a series of what at first appeared to be tumor-like growths, until she took up nearly 3/4 of the room. I could just barely make out her face in the sea of jagged skin, which in addition to the various growths was peppered with countless bleeding sores and in some spots, holes that led within her body, along with all the muscles and tissue visible inside. My father was nearly halfway down one of the wells that led into my mother. His screams, nothing more than what sounded like shouts underwater. His legs flailed wildly, until they didn't. Once he stopped fighting, he was slowly consumed by the mass of flesh. I stood there in abject terror as my mom's eyes turned to me and teared up. She moaned in pain, the most misery I could ever imagine a person being in. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't equipped to respond to what I was seeing, and I was even less equipped for what followed. The tumorous growth nearest to me began to break open, a clear, thick water spilling out of it. Then something reached out and pulled itself through the opening. The thing was a mass of stringy limbs, as many as 6 arms and more legs. Teeth jutted out from all over it, separate form and also inside multiple mouths that contained long, wet tongues. And it had numerous blinking eyes. It screamed, loud and long, and it seemed to be in pain. That's when I noticed the floor just past it. It had been removed, and the thing that was presumably once my mother had grown downward towards the basement. My dad's keys were on the floor next to the door, so I picked them up and ran to the basement door. It took me a minute, but I unlocked the 5 locks and descended the basement stairs. Down the stairs and to the right was the rest of her and them. She had grown down all the way to the floor, and there were more of the limbed things writhing about. More of them, at least 50 in varying sizes, were piled up on the opposite side of the basement, from where the crooked mass that was my mother fed through the floor. Another of her sores burst, another monster falling out of it. I didn't know what to do. I was in shock. I stood there for at least a half hour, watching these things be born into misery. Their mess of arms and legs and teeth and eyes, begging to understand what and why they were. I finally snapped out of it and turned to go back upstairs. And that's when I noticed a message etched into the back of the basement door. Nick, if you are seeing this, take the gun at the bottom of the stairs and kill her. Sure enough, there was a shotgun positioned at the bottom of the stairs. I went back down and grabbed it, then meekly made my way to my mom's room. The clear liquid from within her had formed a thin river down the hallway, which I avoided as I made the trek down back to the room. My legs shook so violently that I nearly crumbled with every step. I had never fired a gun before. I didn't even know we had one. We lived in the country, in a place that could be somewhat accurately described as in the middle of nowhere. But we didn't live a country lifestyle. I had the common sense for how to operate the pump-action Mossberg 590, but it was nearly as big as me, and far more intimidating. I took a reluctant step back into the room where my bloodied, wounded, and presently breathing mother was howling in pain. I nearly vomited again when I saw my dad. From a gaping wound on the side that faced me, his mangled, twisted body began being ejected. But my mother's gaze took my attention away from that. I took apprehensive, uneasy steps towards her, shaking so much that in retrospect, I find it to be a miracle that the shotgun didn't go off prematurely. Her face was like any other. The stretching and growth of her body hadn't affected it at all. She had glistening brown eyes that hypnotized me when I looked into them, and I truly believe that she must have been beautiful before all that. But right then, in that room, part of her brain was visible in the mess of the tangled, unkempt hair. She was an amorphous blob of skin and blood and bones, and sinew and mouths and teeth, and perhaps most noticeably, fear. I looked into her shining eyes still so full of life, and I saw fear, pure fear, anguish, misery, pain, fatigue. While her mouth moaned and groaned and screamed, her eyes begged for mercy, begged for all of it to end. I sobbed. I was experiencing so many things all at once that I could feel my body and mind nearly shut down entirely. There was a fear I hadn't known and haven't known since. There was a confusion at what it was I was witnessing and doing in that moment. There was apprehension towards pulling a trigger and ending a life. There was bereavement for my father, whom at the very moment I became very aware of no longer having in my life. And there was happiness, a small sliver of happiness. I had finally met my mom. It didn't matter that she was this mutated, mangled mess that had grown to nearly the size of a room and down into the basement. It didn't matter that she had hideous, bulbous growths and sores all over her body. It didn't matter that she'd consumed my father and spit him out like a chicken bone. It didn't matter at that moment that she had unimaginable horrors falling out of her wounds and thrashing around in perceived malignancy. She was my mom. She was my mom, and she needed help. I used all my strength to pull back on the hand grip and load it around into the shotgun. I lifted it and looked into my mother's eyes, which sparkled under the bright light above. I watched a tear roll down her. It traveled down where her cheek would have been, eventually getting lost in a crease of bruised, jagged skin. Her eyes said more than any of her mouths ever could. Her eyes told me she loved me, and that what I was doing was okay, that it was what she wanted. I tried to say I love you, but the words got caught in my dry throat and were barely intelligible. She just looked at me, pleading with her eyes. I cleared my throat and said it again. I love you, Mom. And I pulled the trigger. My ears rang after the deafening blast from the shotgun exploded from the barrel and splattered me, the walls and everything else with a mess of blood and that clear, watery substance. Tumors still opened and those things still wriggled out. I stood there for a moment, my world spinning around me. I then felt a tug at the bottom of my pajama pants. I looked down and found a gelatinous pile of wet skin and teeth and tongues and holes with one of that I could see 3 arms reaching out. Its 4 jagged, bleeding fingers curled around the cotton at my ankle. I didn't want to do it. I honestly didn't. It seemed like mercy. I killed it. Then I killed another. Then another. I killed them until there were no more shells in the gun. There were more lumps on my mom's corpse with things squirming underneath. I didn't have it in me to keep looking into these things, many eyes, and ending them. As another monster broke free from the mass that dwelled behind the 3rd door on the left and down into the basement, I retrieved both of the gas cans my dad kept on the back porch, and followed by the propane tank from the grill, and then I listened to it all burn. The screams of agony dwindled as the flames roared. The short, miserable lives of my brothers and sisters, ending in a violent cocktail of gas and fire and smoke. My new reality dawned on me as I walked the 11 miles into town and to the police station. My dad was dead. Gone. And at the time, I thought I would remember him as a man who, however selfish it may have been, loved his wife so much he did everything he could to keep her with him. But a nearly $500,000 payout from the will of a man who made less than $10,000 a year and didn't have life insurance has led me to question who he really was, and added to the already mountainous amount of questions I had about the circumstances surrounding my mother. I've accepted that I will likely never know the truth about why my dad kept my mom alive, if it was out of love or some other, more nefarious reason, nor what happened to her in the first place. What I do know is that I've chosen to believe that my mom loved me, that she really did ask after me in between her ever-increasing bouts of misery and birthing, and I know that I loved her, and I know that she needed to be set free. Don't Look at Me, written by Alexandria Trace. I feel as though my life has been ripped out of my chest. 2 days ago, the sound of my husband's soft breathing lulled me to sleep. Tonight, he is dead. I don't remember what I did all day yesterday. I can hardly think at all. All I know is I want someone to hold me and to listen to me cry. But the only one I had was him, and he is gone. There is no one left to listen, no one left to understand. It's like I've fallen suddenly into a universe of my own, where the pain is too deep even for tears. I'm suffocating, yet I still breathe, because I can smell him on our bed. Please, let me dream of him. Even a false vision of him in sleep would be better than this void in my chest. Sleep, please, just sleep. I twist and allow my hand to fall over the edge of the bed, For a moment, I remember the foolish fear we all feel when our limbs are exposed to the terrifying darkness beyond the edge of the mattress. A twinge of that fear comes to me now, a feeling other than pain. I adjust my arm to hang lower, allowing my fingertips to dangle just on the edge of the darkness below. The fear is cold, tingling. It's something to fill the void. An hour passes, 2, 3. My mind finally begins to brush the edges of slumber when I feel something touch my fingers. My eyes open, yet I do not move. The fear is ice. I'm certain the sensation was merely my mind slipping into the dreams I so longed for, so I do not move or recoil. Then the gaunt fingers of a hand intertwine with mine. With a startled cry, I jump up on the mattress and flick on the lamp. The room is quiet and still, save for my panting breath. I am clutching the hand I had left exposed to my chest. It takes a few moments to build the resolve to look under the bed. And when I do, there is nothing but dust on the bare wooden floor. Is this what grief does to your mind? I wonder. When I return to bed, I leave the lamp on. The next day, I am hollow once more. My boss is calling, wondering why I'm not at work. I know if I explain to him, say the words, "My husband is dead," I will be granted the time I need, yet I cannot bring myself to answer the phone. I haven't told anyone. I think this is maybe because a part of me still doesn't believe this is real. I am still floating in a fog, as though my pushing reality away will somehow keep him safe, even though it is too late. I wonder if this was how he felt when he learned that his mother died last month, and his father just a week after. Was he floating too? Typically, the death of one's elderly parents can be taken in stride. Most people have warning signs, declining energy, fragile health, to let them prepare themselves for the inevitable. But my husband's mother, then father, died without any such warning, and we were never allowed to see the bodies. Despite the fact that they separated years ago and live in different states, their manner of death was nearly identical. His mother was in her home when she died. The authorities said they believed a mountain lion must have become trapped in her home somehow and killed her when she startled the wild animal upon coming home. 2 weeks later, his father didn't come home from a camping trip. This time, a wild bear was blamed. 1 week ago, my husband went to stay at his father's house to settle some affairs. I was asked to identify his body, but there wasn't enough of his face left for me to see, so I was shown the tattoo on his shoulder instead. Without realizing it, I am now caressing my own ink on my inner wrist. A dragonfly, exactly like the one my husband had. That night, I wonder if I should sleep on the couch. Perhaps laying in the bed we shared for years is what caused me to freak out last night. And all I need is a change of scene. As I lay on the cold leather couch, the ticking of the living room clock chants its maddening mantra. Tick, 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 tick. I count them for a while, the maddening ticks. Then my mind wanders to dark places where I should not have allowed it to go. The sheet the coroner used to conceal my husband's body spared me only some of the horror of what lay on that metal table. I wonder if my husband screamed when his ankles were twisted until his joints splintered. I wonder if his eyelids were sliced off before or after his fingers were each split and the flesh was peeled away from the bone. I wonder what the last thing was that crossed his mind before he finally drowned hours later in his own blood when he was left alone on the floor. He had told me after his father died that he sometimes would hear his voice whispering at night. Did he hear his father's voice one last time in those final moments? Did he think of me? I hadn't noticed. My arm is now dangling from the edge of the narrow couch. I am too lost in my own dark thoughts until the fingers wrap gently around my hand again. For a moment, I gasp in fear, but then an anger fills me, and I grab the hand with all of my strength and attempt to pull it up, to see what is tormenting me. But the hand is far stronger than I expect, and slips from my grasp back into the darkness. Strange. It felt so thin and frail. I lean over the couch, but the space beneath it is nowhere near the size that would allow anyone or anything to hide beneath. Am I going mad? I lay down once more, but the feeling of the hand's skin against mine won't leave my thoughts. My husband used to hold my hand as we fell asleep. I remember the softness of his lips when he kissed my wrist. I remember the smell of his hair when he rested his head on my chest. I remember his warmth. The dead leather of the couch is still cold against my skin. Without realizing why I was doing it, I allowed my hand to dangle over the edge once more. An experiment, perhaps. My eyes close and I listen to the clock. After a few minutes, the fingers intertwine with mine again. They are still gaunt like bone, but for some reason, they feel almost warm this time. With a sign, I allow the hand to hold mine. I am already alone. What more can I lose? If this is madness, I don't have the energy to fight it anymore. The bony thumb strokes my wrist as I fall asleep.
Don't look at me, 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 look at me, don't look at, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at, don't look at me, don't look at me.
Everything is dark. The ticking of the clock has become my husband's whispering voice.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
I try to call out to him, but I have no voice. I turn, searching in every direction, and still see nothing but emptiness. His voice sounds more desperate, but how could I not look? All I want is to see him next to me one last time. I need the closure of saying goodbye. I don't want to float in this emptiness anymore.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
I can't breathe. I need to tell him I need him. I need to tell him I love him. I need to scream. I'm woken up by my own voice screaming his name. I sit up and realize that the sun has risen. My hand is empty. However, my mind feels clearer. I go into the bathroom and evaluate my disheveled hair and the wrinkled shirt I haven't changed out of for days. With a deep breath, as though preparing for a plunge, I splash cold water on my face. Dark circles have formed under my eyes. How long have I been shut away? I'm late when I come into work. A few of my coworkers look up with concern from their desks, but I am confident that I am wearing enough makeup to convince them that I am fine. I am not broken. Everything is normal, and I have a normal life to return to at the end of the day. After telling my boss that I have been sick and apologized for not answering his calls, I am sent back to my desk with a harsh warning. The day goes on forever. I catch myself sneaking a glance under my desk more than once, as though I expect to find the owner of the hand hiding there. I intentionally leave my own hand hanging beside my chair, dangling just out of my sight. I even wiggle my fingers expectantly. Nothing happens. The day drags. After the end of my shift, I rush home and switch off all the lights before diving into bed. Is this madness? It must be. And yet the hand is the only thing keeping me from feeling completely alone. Closing my eyes, I dangle my hand over the dark space under the bed. Within a minute, the hand wraps its fingers into mine. I smile and hum my husband's favorite song that I used to sing to him when he wasn't feeling well. My heart is warm again. As the sun slips from the sky, I fall asleep without effort.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
The darkness has returned. The cold. My husband's voice. If only I can find it, I will find warmth again.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
His voice becomes frantic as I continue to reach out, searching for him. Don't do this to me, I want to say. Don't leave me without holding me one last time. The dream continues to torment me through the night, and the night after that, and the one after that. It's been weeks now, and every night I reach out for the hand beneath my bed. Every night it brings me the comfort and allows me to sleep. Every night my husband's voice haunts me, begging me not to look at him. I don't understand. I can think of nothing else. My boss is threatening to fire me, but I don't even care. My husband, I can hear him, but I never find him. The hand brings his voice to me, and every night he feels closer and closer. He's right in front of me. I'm nearly there. My coworkers whisper and cast strange glances at me throughout the day. Why do I bother coming here again? I was never friends with any of these people. It's all such a waste of time. All I want is to go home and hold the hand again. All I want is to hear my husband's voice, pull him from the torment of his death and back into my arms. Safe. Together. It wasn't fair what happened. It makes no sense. No one makes sense anymore. Tonight's the night. I know I can find him this time. It's like his lips are brushing my ear in my sleep, pleading. But that doesn't matter. What matters is I've almost found him. Everything will be okay. I know he's scared, but I will be there for him. I won't leave him alone in that darkness. With my eyes dutifully closed, I thrust my hand purposefully beyond the edge of the bed. The bony fingers, slow and gentle as always, find mine and wrap lovingly into our nightly embrace. I relax, summoning slumber. The darkness consumes me. I can hear him. He is right in front of me, screaming.
Don't look at me! Don't look at me! Don't look at me! Don't look at me!
The darkness. Why is the darkness in my way? Why can't I breathe? What is holding me down, pinned to the bed? The darkness. My eyes, they're closed. Of course, I'm such an idiot. All I need to do is open my eyes. I am in my bedroom. I am lying on my back. I am looking at the thing that is holding me down. Its eyes are wide, staring at me because there is no skin left on the face. Its arms and legs are twisted at bizarre, agonizing angles. Fingers with the flesh peeled back, exposing bone, are intertwined with my own, holding me down as it watches me sleep. Its mouth opens as though to scream, and before its teeth sink into the flesh of my face, I see the tattoo on its shoulder. I shouldn't have looked at him.